If you want a complete list of all the advantages of the cloud, here they are. So this is, I would say these are I need to count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 10 most obvious advantages of using the cloud compared to doing everything yourself. So when I talk about doing everything yourself, I mean buying your own computers, putting them somewhere. Doesn't really matter where you put them. You can put them in your own home, in your office, in a private data center. That doesn't really matter. But you buy the computers, you install them yourself, you run them yourself, and you have everything under control. You do everything yourself. So we are comparing that scenario to the scenario where you don't buy any hardware at all, and instead you just put all your IT in the Microsoft data center. So you're using the Azure cloud. You get a couple of advantages by using the Azure cloud, and these are the most important ones. A really important concept here is something called high availability. Now let me start with the one we've already covered, global reach. Global reach, which I've already described, is that Microsoft has data centers all over the planet. And it's super easy to put stuff in any data center of your choosing. So you could pick West Europe, and that means everything goes here in the Netherlands, which is nice. I mean, the data center is close by. Dutch companies will only be up to 100 kilometers away from the Microsoft data center. So it's fairly close by, and it means that the network access is going to be really fast. But maybe there are customers in Japan. And the customers also want access to data, and they are complaining because the Japanese need to go on the internet, go all the way to Middenmeer in Holland to grab the data, and then all the way back to Japan. I mean, you go halfway around the planet, so that's going to take a while. I mean, information moves at close to light speed on the internet, but still, I mean, going halfway around the Earth, you're going to notice that delay. So maybe we want to make the Japanese customers happy by giving them the best possible performance. And we can do that by putting files in the Japanese data center. So the Azure data center located in Tokyo, we can put the data there. And then when the Japanese access the data, they will load the data from Tokyo and not from Amsterdam. Well, not from Middenmeer, I should say. And they will get the best possible performance. So you get this global reach advantage. Again, you could do this yourself, but then you would have to rent data centers all over the world. And obviously no company is going to do that. So global reach is a huge advantage here. Agility is also a big advantage. So we covered that as well. You've got the freedom to experiment. You can very easily create a server, a database server or a web server in the cloud, run a little experiment, and then when you are done, when you've got your conclusions, you delete the server, the database server, the web server, and it's gone, and you are no longer paying for that server. So you're only paying for as long as you're using a server. When you create something, you start paying, and when you delete it, you stop paying. And again, you can do this yourself, these experiments, but then you need to buy computers, you need to run your experiment, and at the end of the experiment, you've got this computer left over. And it's like, oh my God, how am I going to use that computer? How am I going to recoup my investment? So that whole problem of recouping your investment, you don't have that in the cloud at all. And that makes you super agile. That makes companies really agile. So again, a big advantage. Okay, then there is a concept here in cloud IT called high availability. It's a really important concept. Basically what it means is that when we put stuff, when we create an IT infrastructure, like we put a database somewhere, we host the database ourselves or we install it in the cloud, we want to protect our customers from calamities, from errors, from calamities, from problems. So if for any reason the database would shut down or crash, we would like our customers not to notice that at all. So, if the server crashes, or if there's an error message, or a blue screen of death, or the hard disk just fails, the hard disk explodes for whatever reason, or the power it gets cut, or the internet connection gets disrupted, there's any kind of stuff that can go wrong in IT, and pretty much anything goes wrong in IT. This is a domain where, you know, the worst case scenario happens pretty much every week. So you want to protect your customers against these calamities. And we have this concept called high availability, which means that when you install a database in the cloud, you install it twice. So you install the same database 2 times. And one database will be running. So this will be the live database that everybody's using. And the other database is in a kind of standby mode. So it's completely up to date. All the data is on that database, but it's not actually being used. And it's a completely different server. So we have these 2 computers, separate computers. They're also separated from each other physically. So they're like 50 meters apart or 100 meters apart. And one is running the active database and the other one is in standby mode. And the whole idea here is that if one database, if the active database crashes for whatever reason, for any reason, then immediately the standby database takes over. So the second database immediately takes over and becomes the active database. So a customer wouldn't even notice that there is a crash, because 1 second the customer is talking to the active database, and a second later the customer is talking to the standby database that has activated automatically. So we call this high availability. And you can do this for any service, not just databases. You can do this for websites as well, web servers. You can do it for files in the cloud. You can upload files into 3 different locations. And then if one location, if one hard disk crashes, the other hard disks can take over right away. So you can do this for pretty much any service in the cloud. And Microsoft has already built this high availability infrastructure. So if you want to use high availability in any of your IT services, you can simply toggle a switch and you can tell Microsoft, yes, I want high availability. And then you will be using the high availability components that Microsoft has already created. So the advantage here is you don't have to do this yourself. I mean, you could build everything yourself, like install 2 databases, put like a smart network in front of those databases that immediately switches over to the second database if there is any problem. You can build the stuff yourself. I mean, it's all documented on the internet, but it takes time to build and you need specialized knowledge. So you would need somebody to build that for you. So a company would need a trained system administrator to create this high availability infrastructure and then keep it running and maintain it and debug it if things go wrong. And in the cloud, you don't need that person to maintain that stuff for you, because Microsoft has already built the high availability infrastructure and is maintaining it for you. So you can basically tell Microsoft, yes, I would like high availability. And then Microsoft will tell you, sure, here is your first database, here is your second database, you know, and that's it. And then it's up and running. And then customers will never see a failure in any server because the other server will just take over right away. So this is high availability. Customers can access data and resources and software pretty much all the time. And this also gives you fault tolerance. So if any if there's any hardware issue in the data center, if a hard disk fails, if a computer burns down, if power is cut, if somebody trips over a network cable and the network cable disconnects and all of a sudden the Microsoft data center has no internet connection anymore, you know, if that kind of stuff happens, then customers won't notice, because you will get this automatic switch over to the backup services and they will just naturally take over. So you get this high availability advantage and the fault tolerance advantage, and you don't have to build this yourself. So this mechanism is really cool, but you can use it for another, you can use it for something else as well. If we have our services installed multiple times, we also get another advantage called scalability. And scalability means, let's say that we have a website, and it's a company website. So we are data engineers, we're working for the company, and let's say the company is Albert Heijn, and we have this website, albertheijn.nl, running happily in the cloud. And there are 100 users on the website ordering groceries, and everything is working fine. And then all of a sudden, there is this huge surge, like thousands and thousands of new customers arrive at the website and start ordering groceries as well. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's Friday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and everybody is starting to enter their grocery orders into the Albert Heijn website. So we went from 100 users to 100,000 users in like a minute. Now you can imagine that a single server, one single web server, won't be able to handle that load. A single web server can handle a lot of customers, but not 100,000. That's just not going to work. So we can use a trick here. If we have that web server installed multiple times in the cloud, like with high availability, we have like 2 copies. We could have 3 copies or 5 or 10. You can have as many copies as you like. Let's say we have let's say we have 1 web server running in the cloud, and that web server is just completely overloaded because there are 100,000 people on the site. We can start adding copies. So we could add a second copy of that web server, or a third copy, or a fourth copy. We can literally copy that web server a couple of times in the cloud. And then we could instruct that Microsoft Azure network to evenly distribute the customers over these copies. So let's say that we have 10 web servers running in the cloud, and we have 100,000 customers. We could tell the Azure network to put 10,000 customers on one web server, 10,000 on the next web server, 10,000 on the next web server, and so on and so on. So we evenly distribute 100,000 people over 10 different web servers. And maybe that's enough, maybe that will ensure that the web server is able to handle that high load. And we can automate this. Get this, you can completely automate it. So if a web server is under high load, we can detect that automatically, and we can instruct the Azure cloud to start adding copies of a web server automatically to evenly distribute the load over more than 1 server. And we can also do this in the other direction. So if the load reduces, if those 100,000 customers all leave and we're back to 100 customers, we can instruct Azure to remove those extra copies, start deleting those extra web servers one by one until we're back to 1 or maybe 2 servers. So we can dynamically expand our copies and shrink our copies. And we call that scalability and elasticity. So scalability means adding more copies of a service to handle a high load, and elasticity means removing the extra copies to accommodate a shrinking load. When things quieten down again, we can remove the extra copies and get back down to 1 server or maybe 2 or 3 servers, anything you like. So we call this scalability and elasticity. So customers will never see a website that is not accessible, because when a website is under high load, you will automatically get these extra copies. So everything will just happily continue to work in any given scenario. Now you can build this yourself. So you can build this scalability infrastructure and elasticity infrastructure. Again, it's all documented on the internet, but to build this yourself is a lot of work. And you will probably need a dedicated person to install and maintain that infrastructure. When you use the cloud, Microsoft has done it for you, and Microsoft will maintain it for you. So you can simply toggle this when you create a web server. Microsoft will ask you, do you want scalability? Yes or no? And you can just toggle that switch to yes, and then you will use the scalability framework that Microsoft has already built in the cloud. So this is really cool. You get all these advantages out of the box. Finally, Microsoft also provides backup software. There is backup software built into the Azure cloud. So anything you create in the cloud can be backed up. The backup files are automatically copied into a safe container. So they are automatically stored in a safe location. This is like heavily encrypted. So hackers can't steal your backups. It's heavily encrypted, completely secure. It's stored in another location. So if you have servers running in the Netherlands, your backups are automatically sent to Ireland. So if anything happens to the Netherlands, the backups are safe. Microsoft has already done all this stuff for you. So you get disaster recovery as well. If a disaster happens, if your IT is wiped out for whatever reason, all your data is corrupted in the cloud, your entire infrastructure is corrupted, nothing works anymore, you can just restore a backup. So you restore the backup, you install the backup on top of your infrastructure, and you're up and running again. So this whole disaster recovery infrastructure Again, Microsoft has built it for you. Now finally, putting stuff in the cloud is a bit scary because you're trusting your business data to Microsoft, and you're putting that data in Microsoft's data center in Middenmeer. And I can imagine that that's a scary concept, because how safe is that data? So Microsoft is of course aware of this. They know that people will have this worry, that they worry about security. So Microsoft has invested a lot of time and money into securing their data center. They have pretty much done anything conceivable to make sure that your data is safe in that data center. Obviously, the building itself is protected. The data center has a fence around it. There is a security system. There are guards. Nobody can enter the server room. There are electronic doors with biometric locks. The doors are like steel doors, so it's pretty much impossible to get into the data center itself and get access to the servers. So Microsoft has invested a lot of time securing that aspect, but they have also secured the digital part. So the network is secure, access to the network is secure, the services are secured, all the patches, the latest patches are installed. So all the security hotfixes, Microsoft will install them for you. So they are using best practices to secure the IT infrastructure. Again, you can do this yourself, but this is a full-time job. You need to be completely up to date on the latest hacking techniques and the latest security exploits, and you need to constantly adapt your infrastructure and install hotfixes, install patches, reconfigure your IT infrastructure to keep it safe, keep it secure. And Microsoft has trained specialists who do that all day. So again, you rent this, you rent access to these security specialists who will then work to keep your data secure in the cloud. So all of these are advantages. Technically, you can do all of this stuff yourself. There's nothing magical about the Azure cloud, and you can easily build your own cloud if you want, and replicate all of these advantages in your own IT setup, but it's expensive, basically. And Microsoft can use economy of scale here. They've done it once, and now they are renting it to customers. So the rental fee that you pay to Microsoft is a lot lower than what you would have to invest upfront if you want to do all of these things yourself. So a big advantage here is cost and accessibility to all of these features. So again, this is something that's really lucrative for small businesses. They get access to all of these pro features, these enterprise features, at a very low price point. And so this is a really nice advantage of using the Azure cloud. So, so these are the 10 most important advantages of using the Azure cloud. So high availability and fault tolerance, scalability and elasticity, global reach, and well, customer latency. Customer latency means the delay on the network. So how expensive it is to, how long it takes to access data on the cloud. So by putting stuff in Japan, in Tokyo, you can help your Japanese customers, and you can make sure that anyone has the fastest possible performance level. So we call this customer latency, and you want the latency to be as low, as small as possible. You become super agile. You can just install servers to use for experiments, and when you're done, you just delete everything, and you no longer pay for those servers. So your cost model gets really simple. It's a pay-per-use model. You pay for what you use per month, so you can easily calculate what your monthly bill is going to be. And you get access to enterprise-level disaster recovery and enterprise-level security. You get all of that in the Azure cloud. So as data engineers, you need to be aware of these USPs, these unique selling points, because you will get into those conversations with customers regularly. They will ask you, what are the advantages of the Azure cloud? And you need to be able to list a couple of them from this list of 10, most important features, because this will set their minds at ease and help them embrace a migration to the Azure cloud.